We are going to look at Jews in space and searching for alien life. It's been on my radar screen for a couple of months now, but came up just a couple of weeks ago, as you can see in source number one. This was a news item in the Times of Israel, which came from the Associated Press and other news aggregator agencies. Astronomers say they found the strongest ever hints of life beyond our solar system. Might sound something like you'd see on like one of those Discovery channels, or the old show X-Files. But astronomers announced Thursday, right, this is going back to the middle of April, that they had detected the most promising hints of potential life on a planet beyond our solar system, though other scientists express skepticism. There's been vigorous debate in scientific circles about whether the planet K218b, which is 124 light years away in the Leo constellation, could be an ocean world capable of hosting microbial life, at least. Using the James Webb Space Telescope, a British-US team of researchers detected signs of two chemicals in the planet's atmosphere, long considered to be biosignatures, indicating extraterrestrial life. The researchers emphasized caution, saying that more observations were needed to confirm these findings, that they were not announcing a definitive discovery. K218b has long been considered the premier candidate for a Haitian planet, an ocean world bigger than Earth with a hydrogen-rich atmosphere. These planets would not be expected to be home to intelligent alien life, but rather tiny microbes similar to those in the Earth's ocean billions of years ago. So no little green men just yet, but the possibility of life, as we describe it in other planets. This is the strongest hint yet. So the question is there life out there? Is there ET? Well, can we phone home and all of that? But what is how do we view creation? And we talk about our world, but is there some form of other type of life, other life forms out there, right? There's that very famous cartoon about the astronaut landing on Mars, about to strike a match, and all the little Martians say, "No, you can't do that. It's Shabbos." Right? It's do we have any indications or discussions of this from a Jewish perspective, from Torah sources? So, in some ways, the idea that there are other forms of life might be something built into the creation story, the Bereshit story, even from the text itself. In Bereshit 6, after creation and after the sin of the tree of knowledge, and we move forward a few generations, we encounter the following. Source number 2, there were what are referred to as the Bnei Elohim. The Bnei Elohim saw the Benot Adam, the divine beings, or literally sons of God, saw the daughters of man. And they took wives from among those that pleased them. And the Lord said, "My breast shall not abide in man forever, since he too is flesh. Let the days allowed be 120 years. It was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth, when the divine beings cohabitated with the daughters of men, who bore them offspring. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown." So, at least if we take this translation and go forward, there are these divine beings marrying mortal women and having certain special Nephilim offspring, sometimes understood as giants or the like. So that, but what is it? The word Elohim is a word that gives us a pause, because we often pronounce it Elohim when we're talking about God, but the word Elohim is also used to describe a human of renown. So, for example, Elohim refers to judges. For example, when they talk about two people have a dispute, the Torah says, "Ad ho Elohim yavo dvar shnehem." It doesn't mean they go to God, it means they go to the judges. So there's this word that can have a dual or triple or multiple meanings relating to the word Elohim. The idea of Elohim is often understood from a spiritual or Kabbalistic perspective as referring to the divine presence being felt in nature, as opposed to God's name of Hashem or Adonai, the way we pronounce it, which is God transcending nature. The way it represents this idea of God was, is, and always will be, right? This idea of an infinite God, this idea of an omniscient and omnipotent God that transcends the physical. Elohim is the God of our world. So there's this idea of there being sons of God and daughters of man cohabitating. There seems to be some type of divine element. There's sometimes extra worldly element, or maybe we can call it extraterrestrial component into the influences on this planet. And it seems that they had offspring that are born here. I'm not sure which sci-fi movies you're thinking of, but there's something unique about the verse. Certainly in its more straightforward translation, and of course we can go in all sorts of different directions. But this idea of there being elements to creation that transcend our human classification and categorization, that there is within creation, the broader creation aspects that go beyond just our own physical existence, is something even Maimonides talks about. Source number 3 from Rambam's Yesodei HaTorah. All of the stars and spheres are beings. All the stars and spheres are beings endowed with a soul, intelligence, and understanding. They continue a purposeful life and are conscious of the existence of him who spoke and the universe sprang forth. Each and every one, according to his greatness and degree, extol and glorify the Creator, as do the angels. And to the extent that they recognize the Holy One, blessed is he, they also know their own selves and the angels above them. But the intelligence of the stars and spheres is less than the intelligence of the angels, but greater than the intelligence of man. So here the Rambam is describing this type of intelligence hierarchy, right? For the Rambam, everything's about intelligence. It's very much, in the Greek philosophical tradition. But he seems to be describing a universe with personality, or at least an intellectual personality and soul, and that there's a certain type of awareness and knowledge to be found throughout the universe, in all of the spheres and all of the heavens and all the constellations, all the stars, all the planets. So there is extraterrestrial life out there. Again, not necessarily life the way we believe it or talk about it or live it, but it seems to be there. In this way the Rambam describes the universe, there's a life force to the universe, and if that's the case, the way the article described that there's some type of life out there on K218b, it's not people walking around, but there's life. So maybe that's can fit into the way the Rambam describes it. Questions, comments, reactions. I don't want to hear any abduction stories, but if there's any reactions to what we've seen so far.
So I'm going to ask at the end how you feel that this fits in with theories of evolution and creation and stuff like that.
All right, so we can get there. Well, I would just say that clearly this source of the Rambam, which talks about a much more dynamic aspect of creation, will certainly fit in with a more, with less literal story of the creation, the way it's played out. And the Rambam is already taking a less literal, a more expansive understanding of the universe. But this fits into other biblical verses. Like, for example, when I was putting this together and see this source, when the Rambam talks about each and every one according to his greatness and degree extol and glorify the Creator, immediately I think of Tehillim 19, Hashamayim Misaprim Kavod El. The heavens speak of God's glory, right? We sometimes, how do we understand that? That the heavens speak. Again, maybe sometimes we try to more rationally understand that. No, that the creation isn't of itself a delivery of a grandeur of the glory of creation. But the Rambam seems to meaning there's a certain vitality, a certain life force that exists throughout the universe. So Rabbi Chasdai Crescus, who's a 13th century Jewish philosopher, I think builds upon this idea of there being a creation that goes beyond just our human categorization, classification, or experience of the world of creation, and takes it into really asking the question. Source number 4, he has talking about different investigations or questions or challenges that we face or try to answer. Is it possible that there's another world or many worlds together? Behold, there are considerations to each side. In favor, there are proofs in favor. Among them, given that the existence of the world is either willed by Hashem or caused, what could prevent his will or necessity in a different world or worlds? Among them, given that the existence of this world is willed by God's generosity and graciousness, it is clear that there's no stinginess in generosity, such that adding worlds only adds generosity. Does it make sense that there should be many worlds, right? God can create anything and everything. So why should we limit God by thinking we're the only ones? If we like to say that God is kind and God is gracious, well, why would we want to limit that graciousness to our experiences, meaning our planet Earth and humankind? Against, well, on the other side, among them, the creator of all existence is one in the purest sense, and so it would be suitable for that which exists to be one. This is because of the accepted point that a pure one should only create a pure one. It is also because the great perfection of something which exists and its influence is to resemble that which it influences to the extent possible. Since it is so that there's no clear argument in favor or against to find the truth in this investigation, what remains the possibility of multiple worlds, thus it is proper to accept that which some of our sages held. So, on the one hand, God is great and God is gracious and God is unlimited. So why should we think that our world is the only world? On the other hand, we have this sense that it's not so simple for there to be a physical creation. If there is a physical creation, you would want there to, you want to put all your eggs in one basket and have the most possible or approaching perfect physical creation. In which case, God created the creation, the Genesis, the Bereshit as we know it, and got it going, and then kind of broke the mold. This echoes the rabbinic teachings when they talk about each individual is unique. Right? Every single person is unique. You don't have two people who are exactly alike. We're all out of distinct molds. Right? So that's the way we look at each individual being created. When it comes to God's creation with a capital C, you don't want to have lots of different types of creations out there like us. We're like God, imitatio Dei, right? How can you have lots of imitators? It cheapens the brand to some extent. However, the Crescus concludes that, look, you got there's arguments for, there's arguments against. The possibility of multiple worlds. This is what some of our sages held. He's referring to various rabbinic comments that there were worlds that God created and destroyed before getting to this world. Right? That's sometimes utilized to explain various some of the evidence that seems to exist of a much older Earth. Right? They talk about finding dinosaur bones and the like, and how can they be so old? And if the universe is started with the story of creation 6,000 years ago, no, God built our creation. Bereshit bara Elokim is built upon the destructed remains of previous worlds, and these are some of the strange Talmudic statements that might be based on this idea. And Crescus says, one way or the other, you have arguments for, arguments against, and so therefore it's proper to accept that which some of our sages held. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan summarizes some of the views in source number 5. The basic premise that of all possible species, only man has free will is well supported by the great Kabbalists. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, using tight logical arguments, he demonstrates that there can be only one set of spiritual worlds. Right? Maybe the idea that he's building upon Crescus's argument against there being multiple worlds. Although God would want to maximize the number of recipients of his good, his very unity precludes the existence of more than one such set. Right, Crescus's argument for multiple worlds is God is good, so why limit the goodness? Kaplan is quoting Cordovero as saying that that might be true, but his very unity precludes the existence of more than one such set. Right, that we said before, that this idea of there being multiple creations kind of cheapens the brand. Since this set of worlds deals specifically with God's providence towards man because of his free will, this also includes the existence of another species sharing this quality. Right? Basically, to some extent, it's almost like the Mishnah in Sanhedrin talks about God created this world and broke the mold. It becomes too complicated to maintain multiple creations. Even though God could do it, it just cheapens the brand. Now, the flip side of this is a comment that is attributed to Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, by Velvel Green, who was a NASA scientist, source number 6. Dr. Green quotes the Rebbe as telling him in one of their meetings, Dr. Green, look for life on Mars. And if you don't find it there, look somewhere else in the universe for it. Because for you to sit here and say there is no life outside of planet Earth is to put limitations on the Creator, and that is not something any of his creatures can do. Right? That was one of the arguments that Kreska said for multiple worlds. God is all powerful. Can't limit God's power. Therefore, the Rebbe is taking that statement and encouraging Velvel Green to find life on Mars or anywhere else, and therefore even K21AB is all part of the exploration to try and recognize that God is all powerful and God can create other worlds, and we don't want to limit God in any way. Now, just when looking around, just so that people don't think that this is a Hasidic approach and not a non-Hasidic approach. Well, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, in a book called Thinking Aloud, which collects some of the Rav's conversations, it's not a sheer on the subject, but he was asked, would the discovery of alien life be an issue in terms of the Torah view? And the Rav responded, it is possible that Hashem created other life form on other planets. It's no problem to Yahadus, to Judaism. The reason man likes to think he's the only created being in the entire universe is because of his egotistical nature. Even the concept of Am HaNivchar, chosen nation, may only be relative to our world, our small section of the universe. The Torah is written from the viewpoint of our sun, moon, and stars. It would not detract from our being the Am HaNivchar of this region of space if there are other Am HaNivchar in a distant galaxy. The Rav, and again, this is not I don't think this is a fully formed declaration or principle, but he says, what's the big deal? There could be Jews on other planets, right? Those Martian Jews who said, don't like the matches Shabbos, may exist. Now, Norman Lamb, in an article on the subject, feels that would take away from this idea of there being a chosen nation, a chosen people. Source number 8, the discovery of fellow intelligent creatures elsewhere in the universe, if indeed they do exist, will deepen and broaden our appreciation of the mysteries of the Creator and his creations. Man will be humble, but not humiliated. Okay, a nice way, he's channeling Rav Soloveitchik on this. But Judaism is only for those who identify as Jews here on earth. Torah was given to man on earth, and his concern is limited to terrestrial affairs. He seems to draw the line that there may be people, there may be little green men, but there are no little green Jews. And that's something where we have to draw the line. So in terms of life on other planets, you have certainly some biblical foundations for there being life beyond the parameters of how we know it. Seen in Bereshis 6, we see the Rambam feeling there's this type of vitality and life force that permeates the entire universe. And if it can permeate the universe, it can certainly express itself in other forms of life. We have Kreskus looking at both sides of the equation, but seeming to, there seems to be this kind of limiting that, the creation here, our Bereshit, capital Bet, capital C, our creation has a certain special place in the overall story because it's ours. We see that, on the one hand, there are those who feel that ours has to be unique. That's the more Cordovero. You have the possibility of why should we limit ourselves as expressed by Lubavitcher Rebbe and the Rav. And then you have the Rabbi Lamb wanting to bring it back to earth, into the Jewish nation by there can only be one Jews, only one Torah and the like. We shouldn't be looking for other approaches. We'll take on the Martian minhag or something like that. And as he concludes, our concern is limited to terrestrial affairs, which will be our springboard of, so do we go searching for this or not? All right, this is the idea of alien life form, but should we go searching for it? or do we remain with our feet firmly planted on terra firma? Just stop for questions, comments, or reactions. Okay, so pivoting to another headline, and this is actually, like I mentioned, for a number of months I've been thinking about this. This was a headline back in September, last September. Tech billionaire pulls off first private spacewalk high above Earth. Right, and we're following the whole SpaceX, and obviously, Elon Musk is in the news a lot with his private space endeavors, and we know that the NASA astronauts were stuck for months on end because NASA couldn't get them home until the private efforts did bring them home. So here we have a tech billionaire performed the first private spacewalk hundreds of miles above Earth on Thursday, a high-risk endeavor reserved for professional astronauts until now. Tech entrepreneur Jared Isaacman teamed up with SpaceX to test the company's brand new spacesuits on this chartered flight. The daring feat also saw SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis going out once Isaacman was safely back inside. The spacewalk was simple and quick. The hatch was open barely a half hour compared with the drawn-out affairs conducted by NASA. Astronauts at the International Space Station often need to move across the sprawling complex for repairs, always traveling in pairs and lugging gear. Station spacewalks can last 7 to 8 hours. This one clocked in at less than 2 hours. Quick, simple. It got done very quickly. And since then, there have been other examples. There were a couple of, there was a celebrity women spacewalk just about a month ago or so. Katy Perry and other, I don't remember. It's like, it's like, hey, you want to have some fun and you have a lot of money? Go on a spacewalk. And, the interesting piece here that I want to catch upon is that it used to be a big deal, a much bigger deal, and now it's less of a big deal. It's not easy, it's not commonplace, but look, you look at the last, since spacewalk started until today, 50 years from now, maybe we'll all be doing spacewalks. So, how does this relate to, is this a good idea? Are there challenges? So from a Jewish perspective, when we look at the lens, this became much the topic of conversation in the 1960s when space travel started, and in particular, they landed on the moon and people were on other planets, and the rabbis started asking some questions about how this might change the practice of Jewish law in outer space. What about Jews going on other planets and the like? In particular, landing on the moon. We're in that period of the month now where we say the Kiddush Levana, where we sanctify and bless the fact that we have a new month starting. And part of that ritual is that you say the expression, Kashem Shani Rokeh Kenegdech Ve'eni Yachol Lingoa Bach. I'm dancing down here before you, but I'm not able to touch you. Because the moon is far beyond our reach. Well, what happens when the moon is no longer far beyond our reach? It's accessible. So the standard response was, yeah, it's accessible to those astronauts on the moon, right? They go on the moon, they get a sip of tang, everyone goes home, it's nice. But you're not there. So, but what about if I was there? What if I'm standing on the moon? Do I say Kiddush Levana? So it got people thinking, also the idea of being, off of planet Earth, and how does that pertain to some of the time-bound commandments, like our daily prayers? How do you calculate days? If Shabbat is the 7th day of the week, how do you calculate Shabbat? How do you calculate a day, and the like? So let's just say that for the most part, the consensus view is that from a halachic Jewish legal perspective, no one was pushing for a yeshiva in space, or for a branch of the Lakewood Yeshiva on the moon, or the like. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's declaration to Velvel Green notwithstanding to go find life on other planets, there was recognizing that outer space isn't necessarily the best place for a nice Jewish boy or girl to facilitate the performance of mitzvot. That said, it began to be discussed and addressed, and there have been Jewish astronauts, and there very famously was an Israeli astronaut, Ilan Ramon, who died when the space shuttle burnt up on reentry. All right, so there's been discussions about the rituals, and let's take a look though at some of the reactions here. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel Kasher, a rabbi originally from Poland and then in Israel, a very prolific author and creative thinker, when he wrote a book called Ha'adam al Hayareach, Man in the Moon. And he said, it is possible, source 10, that it's prohibited to land on the moon because it is forbidden for a person to endanger his life. He says, it's dangerous, right? Space travel is dangerous. Maybe that's getting better, just like spacewalks are getting easier. But he said, from the pasuk, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, there is no proof, because it's possible that the prohibition is only to reside, to live in such a place, but there's no proof that the land in return is prohibited. So Kasher is invoking, there's an idea that's attributed to Rabbi Saadia Gaon, and it's found in his philosophical work Emunah V'Deot. Rabbi Saadia Gaon was from that period of rabbinic leaders in the Middle East, in that the 9th, 10th, 11th centuries, and he was one of the early systematic books on Jewish belief. It was called Emunah V'Deot, and there he talks about the verse Pru Uruvu, right? This idea of filling the earth. You have to be fruitful and multiply to fill the earth. So there's a little bit of a discussion, and it's not 100% clear if it's his comment or another comment or a comment added later to his book. It's not 100% clear, but it seems that the comment is made that the only place for Torah life or Jewish life is this planet. Now, what other planet would he be thinking of and the like? It's unclear, but people have grabbed onto that statement attributed to Rabbi Saadia Gaon to say, no, the only place where Judaism exists, the only place where our life as we know it exists and our divine purpose can be fulfilled is the place we're supposed to fill up, which is this planet. So Rabbi Kasher is saying, and he's writing in the 1969, 1970 about, well, maybe Jews can't go to outer space because we have to live on this planet. And he says it's okay to go to outer space, but you're only going to live on this planet and keep going back and forth. He says it falls under the aforementioned rule that people are forbidden to reside anywhere but on earth until the time comes, if we believe that such a time will come, that this will no longer be considered dangerous. So he says, look, okay, you can visit, he attaches it that it's a danger issue. It's not going against the divine plan for Jews to remain on planet Earth. Jews can go to any other planet as long as it's not dangerous. So Kasher feels that the Jews in space phenomenon, if it's not dangerous, it becomes something to consider. Rabbi Menashe Klein, and you see he's writing in 1971, and he was asked the specific question: if you can go to the moon and if you can say Kiddush Levana while standing on the moon, right? Usually we're looking up at the moon, but he wants to know, well, if you're going to be looking beneath your feet. So he says, he named it Kiddush Levana, about Kiddush Levana. Doesn't matter if you're standing on it or looking at it. Kiddush Levana is Kiddush Levana, as long as you see the moon. Well, if you want to go up to the moon, it's forbidden. Dangerous. You can't go there. And it's dangerous because going up there is dangerous. And also because there's no oxygen there. You can't breathe there without your oxygen tanking, you can't control what may happen, et cetera, et cetera. So he also echoes the danger concern. So with regards to going up to outer space to seek that alien life or live there in general, the danger concern seems to play more prominence, which may mean that just like spacewalks are getting easier, then maybe we'll ultimately reach a point that if the danger is removed, although I think it's going to take a long time, because even though it's more simple and straightforward, doesn't mean it's necessarily a very danger-free thing. There's plenty that can go wrong, which increases the level of the danger, and how to quantify that level of danger is a larger discussion. But we're not talking just because things are going fairly smoothly doesn't mean that they're dangerous. It doesn't mean they're safe enough to then permit them from a halachic perspective and avoid the concerns of danger that Kasher and Klein are addressing. And then you'll have the separate halachic. You'll have just the kind of, does this make any sense from a Jewish religious perspective? And that's something that Rabbi Moshe Sternbuch talks about, where he says, source number 12, it appears that we've received the Torah with the times as they are in our world, and one who departs this world has removed himself from the time-dependent mitzvahs like Shabbos and Yom Tov, or day and night with respect to Shema and Tefillah, prayer, and it's prohibited to remove oneself from the obligations of the Torah because we serve Hashem to keep his mitzvahs. So Rabbi Sternbuch points out that we're going to be dealing with the complicated situation of how to be Jewish in outer space, because, and he uses this term elsewhere in the discussion, that the Judaism as we know it works in our environment. Some of the conversation that you have about outer space you could have in terms of some of the extreme locations on Earth, North Pole, South Pole. You have no nighttime, no daytime. These are extreme situations that have confused and added complexity to the halachic conversation on Earth.
And no knowledge where to face toward the
right.
coast.
There's the whole, they tell humorously the story of the first observant Jewish astronaut who comes down from a week in space orbiting the Earth, and they say, how was it? And the astronaut says it was exhausting. Exhausting, that's all you have to say. You're looking down at the Earth, the majesty, the grandeur, the glory of God in creation, outer space, etc. What's so tiring? He's like, no, Shachris min chamar, Shachris min chamar, Shachris min chamar, because all he did was daven all day, because each orbit required Shachris min chamar. So it becomes complicated how to understand that. When we talk about being in places, even going to those types of places today are at times frowned upon by various rabbinical authorities, because you're removing yourself from a straightforward performance of one's religious obligations. At the same time, we recognize that it must be that we can apply Torah to any place on earth, and even though it seems that the halacha, as we know, was really meant and centered around where the land of Israel is in that basic area, but as we've spread out, we've had to adjust. This leads to questions about dateline. It leads to questions about what the propriety of ever crossing the dateline, or how do you deal with it if you cross the dateline. So certainly going into outer space creates a whole host of halachic issues that Rav Sternbuch says are less than ideal for the practicing Jew.
And 2 days of Yontif, or maybe 3.
Who knows? One of the most fascinating, I think, halachic decisions we have with regards to the dateline, is timely, in our Omer discussion, has to do with crossing the dateline during the Omer. And often we say, look, we follow the halacha, we follow the place where we are, right? And crossing the dateline sometimes leads to challenges, and there are certain views that about keeping 2 days of Shabbos in certain countries and the like. But when you travel from America to Australia, you lose a day, and if you go from Australia to America, you gain a day. And the Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson Lubavitcher Rebbe has a halachic determination that you keep the Shavuos, the counting of the Omer is based on 49 days, the days that you count. Well, if you go to Australia and lose a day, your Shavuos is going to be a day ahead of them. And if you come here, your Shavuos is going to be a day behind. So it's kind of fascinating, and there are people who tell of and there's a different minyan. In theory, if you had enough people for Shavuos who travel from America to Australia or Australia to America, so it's complicated, and it kind of waters down what we present as our optimal engagement with halacha. So that's why you don't really have much appetite for, outposts, even as the price of real estate in Orthodox Jewish communities goes skyrockets, we're not looking to colonize Mars or anything like that. It's going to get complicated. It's dangerous. Even when it's less dangerous, it becomes more problematic from a halachic perspective. And then Rabbi Sternbuch, though, just concludes with a kind of an editorial comment, which is very interesting in terms of the allocation of resources. The truth is that besides this, there's a terrible waste of hundreds of billions of dollars in order to show the greatness of America. Even this, if it has some benefit for humanity, it is very small, but they're prepared to pay any price in order to boast and compete with other nations. With the money they invest, they'd be able to save tens of thousands who are dying of hunger. The nation of Hashem should not join or partner with them because it is not our way to waste so much on mere sightseeing. And we should not demonstrate with our participation our endorsement of such things. He's kind of he's curtailing our horizons and not broadening them due to the allocation of resources. And the grand scheme of things, this would require more of a calculation of exactly the amounts being spent versus amounts being spent on other things. And I think that this kind of keeping our feet firmly on the ground without broadening our horizons also fits in with the other reasons not to travel to outer space, both in terms of the danger and in terms of the complexity for Jewish law. Right, stay close to home is the safest bet. So if we're talking about Jews in space and searching for alien life, that alien life might be out there. I think using telescopes to identify it would definitely fit in and avoid any type of danger. Jews being in space creates some unique questions of Jewish law from a perspective of endangering ourselves or the ability to practice Jewish law. And we have to think of what are the best ways to do that. And I would hope that there were some like me who, when they heard the expression Jews in space or saw the image for the class, immediately thought of Mel Brooks and History of the World Part 1. Now you can, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it. Just want to thank Howard Schulder sponsoring this morning's class in memory of his father, Jacob Schulder, Zichrono Livracha. Here's to more Torah study together, and looking forward to seeing everybody, please God, next week.
How did this